Hello, and welcome back to the Nourish with Purpose podcast. If it sounds like a rocket ship is about to take off, I am so sorry. That is my computer. It is about to poop out on me. I can sense it, I can feel it, and I will mourn the day that I lose this thing. I luckily have backed up most things on my computer to an external hard drive, but I just know the day that this thing dies will be tragic. I already had a little bit of a scare earlier this week, actually 3 different times when I was getting on client calls. I open up my computer and the screen is black. I type in my password, the screen goes black, and I'm like, well, turd, how am I supposed to get on these calls if I can't see my screen? So prayers for me that this thing holds on long enough for me to get everything that I need off of it, get a new computer eventually. It's not in the budget right now, but with time, hopefully all will be well. Anyway, wow, what a way to start this episode. I am so sorry about that, but by the time you're listening to today's episode, it is Valentine's Day. I feel like this is a holiday that you either love or you hate. I would say I'm probably somewhere in the middle. Gotta be honest, of course. I'm gotta do something a little bit different, but I don't hate Valentine's Day. I just feel like there are so many different exciting events throughout the year that I don't need one day out of the year to show my husband how much I love him or the people around me how much I love them. But it is a nice reminder to just show a little extra love and attention to the people around you. So, happy Valentine's Day. I do quickly, if you love the podcast and you love me, if you could just send this episode or any of the episodes of mine to a friend right now, pause this episode, send it to them, and then continue listening. That would just mean so much to me. It truly helps the podcast a lot, and I just love doing this. Like, of course, I'm not making any money. I just genuinely love sitting down each week to talk and do more of like a long form type of content. But what you sending the podcast does is it gets more people listening, which is a great thing. And it also allows the podcast to be shown as a recommendation to other people when they're searching for like a health-related podcast or a faith-based podcast. My podcast then, if it's being sent, if it's getting reviews and ratings, it gets pushed out to more people. And so I would just really appreciate that if that is something you take the time to do today. Otherwise, we're just going to get into today's episode. We're going to start with a catch-up. I know last week I talked a lot about how I'm just letting things evolve with time and not trying to force anything. And I was voice messaging my friend Lyndon yesterday, and she voice messaged me something back that was way too good that I just couldn't not share it. But she said, "You never regret waiting for something, but you always regret forcing something." And I was like, that is a mic drop moment, because that is so true. Every time in my life I've tried to force something or tried to make something fit into my schedule that just wasn't really meant to, I've noticed I actually like physically dread doing that thing. Versus if I'm just patient and I let things evolve how they're supposed to. And of course, like I had mentioned last week, you can't just sit here and expect things to happen. But if you're actively just doing the day-to-day things you know you need to do to help your life just continue moving forward, right? Doesn't need to be quickly, but I truly think things just fall into place. And with this, I can kind of share what has really fallen into place for me. I'm going to be very transparent here because I really have nothing to lose. We're friends. I don't really care what, but for the last 8 months until January, I had a social media partnership deal that was making a pretty good amount of income each month for me. Well, that was Lemon8, if you've heard of that app. But that ended in January. And so it just ended because this is from an outside perspective, I don't think the app is getting as much traction as they thought it would. And I truly just don't think there's the interest in like paying people to post to get more people to the platform. And so anyway, that ended in January. And I think that's why a lot of the beginning of the new year was very stressful for me, because When you are responsible for 100% of your own income, that is a very overwhelming feeling. And everything business-wise is going great. Don't stress about that. Everything is great, honestly. I can't complain about where I'm at right now. But I just knew 100% relying on myself to bring in an income is very stressful, and it always just is very heavy on me. And I think it's because, and this is that control piece, I love the control of knowing what my profit is each month. And I do a service-based business, so it's really hard to also have that money exchange because I want to help people for nothing, and that just doesn't work. From a business standpoint, that doesn't work. So I knew that having an external source of income would just put way less pressure on me. And I was really going to force things. There's a greenhouse that was hiring, and I just love plants. I'm like, anything that I do outside of my typical work week, which is like a Monday through Thursday, I just want to really love it. Like, it's not like I'm really doing it because I just need all this money. I just genuinely want something I enjoy that's going to put less pressure on me and my business. And that's just how I approach the business side of things, is I just want something that is an outlet that provides, but I love it. And so for me, I was going to apply for that. I was really going to force things, but it's 50 minutes away from my house. And I'm like, Bailey, that's really stupid. You need to be patient. You need to just let things happen. Well, in the last about week and a half, there was an opportunity for me to barista or work at a coffee shop that's opening in the town that I live closest to, kind of grew up in. And it was honestly just such an answer to prayer. It was just such a reflection of me just giving up that control and waiting for something better to come along, because it's a 10-minute commute. It's 2 days a week. I genuinely love it so much. I have the ultimate dream of owning a coffee shop. My husband and I have talked about this since before we were dating. And then when we were dating, he's like, well, yeah, it could be called like the No BS coffee shop, like Bailey Seaton. And I'm like, that's a little aggressive for my personality. I'm a little too light and happy for that. But I'm like, good thinking. Like, it's just always been on the forefront of my mind. Like, I just love it. But along with that, I'm also a very extreme person. So for me, it's like 0 to 100 very, very quickly. I'm either not doing anything coffee shop related, or I'm buying a building and I'm opening a coffee shop. Like, I don't have that in between. And that's another thing I've been working on this year, is like, okay, let's take the little baby step rather than thinking you have to go 100 miles an hour. And so for me, this was just like that little baby step. I don't know if I'll ever open a coffee shop. I mean, I don't want to say I won't. I don't see it happening for years and years and years and years to come. I just love it. And I just think it's so much fun. I worked at a coffee shop in Omaha in kind of, again, finding that balance between my job most of the week and then having something on top of that. And I just fell in love with it. Like, it is just so much fun. And so that opportunity evolved. And then around that, there's been other opportunities that have evolved. And it's just put so much less pressure on myself. And in return, I also noticed like my business just does better when I'm not putting so much pressure on it. And if you are a business owner, you probably get that. You could sit here and obsess over numbers. You could sit here and obsess over every little aspect of your business, but it's truly not benefiting you. And it's also just, I feel like, showing God that we don't trust him with the future and we don't trust him with what he's creating for us. And I wanted to give this little quote that was in my devotional this last week because it aligned so perfectly with that control aspect. And so I'm reading the devotional Embraced. It's by Lisa Turkhurst, I believe is how you pronounce her name. But anyway, I just wanted to read this little passage to you. So this is at the end of the devotional, but it said, "Here's the part of what I read. Teach me your way, Lord, that I may rely on your faithfulness. Give me an undivided heart that I may fear your name. I will praise you, Lord my God, with all my heart. I will glorify your name forever." An undivided heart. That's what my whole journey in conquering my cravings was about. When it comes to my body, I can't live with divided loyalties. I can either be loyal to honoring the Lord with my body or loyal to my cravings, desires, and many excuses for not exercising. I don't know where you think you might have divided loyalties, or what struggle makes you think I can't, but are you open to God leading in how he wants to show his power in your life? And that last little phrase like gave me goosebumps. I was like, yeah, are you open to letting him show his power, right? And rather than us feeling like we have to know what's going to happen next and having so much obsession over it, if we just like let him show his power, things happen. And I know I've talked a lot about that in the last couple of weeks, and I just feel like it's just something I'm continuing to notice, and it's because I'm really focusing on it right now. But when you really notice all the little things that just happen when you stop obsessing, I just think it's pretty crazy. And I think that was a good thing for me to bring up today too, as we talk about love today. I wanted to take a little bit of a break between the core 4 method. Next week, we'll close that up with the fiber piece of it. But with love, I just feel like there's so many times where we want to have control over when we'll find our future husband, or when that person we like will finally ask us out, or when our boyfriends will propose, or when we'll get married, or when we'll have kids, and there's so many things around love that just stress us out and weigh on us. And I know for me, that definitely was the case for a while. And I'm going to share a little bit about Nate and I's whole journey of meeting each other and what that looked like. But a lot of stress around it and what it's going to look like. And we don't know the future. So how can we give up control over when they'll finally ask us to marry them? And I just have a lot of people around me, I think too, that are kind of in that stage of waiting. Either they're waiting for their forever person, or they're waiting for their boyfriend to propose, whatever that is. I know it can be very stressful. And so it's that control piece of just letting the Lord lead your life, which it can be really hard to do. And sometimes you can find yourself, and this is me, being bitter and thinking, okay, yeah, that's just like a spiritual thing you're saying, whatever. Like it sounds cheesy, you know? But when you actually experience that and you notice it happening in your own life, you're like, okay, Bailey is not just being corny. She's not just saying these things. Like there is so much depth and true meaning behind it. And when we get past like the bitterness or the stubbornness of kind of refusing to give up control, I think that's when we see a lot of really great things happen. So we're diving into all of that today. Quickly, outside of that little bit of a catch up, which was not little. Again, the amount of time I'm talking at the beginning of these episodes just keeps getting progressively longer. So sorry if you're just always here for the meat of the episode. I personally love to get the details in somebody else's life. So give me all the little details. I love that. I guess kind of continuing on with the catch up, anything else that's been going on in my life. Personally, I am just continuing to get into little hobbies. I've talked about my herbalism and building my home apothecary before. I'm definitely still doing that, still taking those classes, learning as much as I can. I've got 2 tinctures that I've made, one for Nate and one for me to add to our coffees. And those are still marinating. They have to rest for 4 to 6 weeks in the solution, and then we can extract the herbs and then use that in our beverages. But I also got a nettle tea, which I'm just super into. I also have started looking into how I can make my own makeup, which I'm going to be sent to the loony bin. So I have to say, Nate is right now in tax season. So he's an accountant. And that means I have a lot of evenings open to just not doing anything. I don't know what to do. I have 100 different hobbies that I've purchased, but for some reason just cannot get back into them. And so I'm like, I've been making my own frankincense tallow. And now I'm like, okay, I think I can make my own makeup with tallow. And I really am hesitating even putting this in the episode because y'all are going to think I'm so loony. And I had said that to Nate. He's like, what are you doing over there? And I was on my iPad. I'm like, oh, I'm just learning how I can make my own makeup. And he's like, I'm not going to ask any questions. And that's just kind of probably the best case scenario. You know, I am just somebody, even if I never do it, I just like to know like what I'm putting on my skin, I don't know. I just like to know all the details. And so I will like intensely research something. And then I'll kind of forget about it for a little bit, and then I'll intensely research something again. And I just love to do that. So I guess that's kind of how I'm filling my free time, is researching things, making things, fantasizing about a different hobby. I don't know. I'm a chronic hobbyer, and we know this by now. I've shared it plenty of times. It's just who I am. I can't help it. I have 5 bazillion interests, which is also why I think me having multiple different jobs is very, very good for my personality, because I lead exercise classes, I do social media work, I coach clients one-on-one, I'm developing a group program, which I haven't announced yet, but keep an eye out for that, because you guys, I can't even talk about it. I'm so excited about that. I have a different platform. Like, people, I've got like 600 things that I do in a day, and it's because I genuinely am obsessed with all of them, right? And so it's the same thing with hobbies, is I just get obsessed with something, and then I'm like, oh, I'm not so interested in it anymore, and then I'm obsessed about it again, and it's just who I am. So I guess that's something else that's been going on. Outside of that, have been spending time with my family. We watched the Super Bowl with them. I always just watch the Super Bowl for the halftime show. Usher did not disappoint. I'm not even going to talk about the results of the game, because I was rooting against the Chiefs, and I won't talk about T Swift because you guys are going to cancel me. I'm just going to leave that very neutral. But anyway, love the halftime performance, love the commercials, don't care so much about the football game. So let's get into how I'm nourishing my mind, my body, and my spirit. So how I'm nourishing my mind right now. This happened last week, but I got outside and just played ball with Luna. So we have this little tennis ball, and it truly just stays outside. She'll go find it and then bring it to us. And I just threw the ball back and forth with her. She would fetch it, and then I went and let out the chickens. And then she like chased them around, riled them back into their little pen. And it's just really cute to just see her thrive on a farm. Luna's my dog, by the way. That could be really weird if you didn't know that. She is my dog. And it was just so nice to get outside, and the sun is shining these days, and it just makes me so happy. How I'm nourishing my body is getting in the weight rack and not being afraid to push myself to lift heavy weight. I've shared about this before, that I'm trying to really increase my muscle mass, and even forward thinking about like getting pregnant or having kids. Like, I just want to feel so physically strong and not feel like and this is no judgment to anybody that's pregnant or is had kids before, because I could 100% see why you just don't want to do anything. But I just really want the habit of like building strong muscle. So during a pregnancy in the future, I feel strong. Like, that's just really my goal. And so this year, I'm kind of setting out to do that. It's just like really pushing myself to get stronger, and getting a gym membership and working out with Nate, which I'm going to talk about in the future of this episode, has been super helpful for that. And then lastly, how I'm nourishing my spirit is the morning devotional that I've been doing. And I read that little insert, but if you are looking for a devotional, I really do love this one. I feel like I have 600 different devotionals. Most of them I got for like high school graduation, but I picked this one out of my bookshelf area and just started opening it up and reading them. And I really like it because I will do a devotional and then I'll read one chapter of the Bible, which you guys know I talk about that almost every week. But I just truly think like reading the Bible is so powerful, and just feeling like you have awareness. Like now when I'm at church and they're preaching about Matthew or Mark or Luke or anything in the New Testament, I'm like, oh my gosh, I've read that. Like now I know the verse that they're talking about because I've read that. And that maybe sounds kind of stupid, but it's just kind of fun to be like, oh my gosh, like I knew that before they said that, like I knew the story. And just having awareness of the stories in the Bible, I just think has really been enjoyable for me. And so that's just a habit that I really love that I've developed. Okay, so today we are talking all about love, mostly because it's Valentine's Day. But with this, we're going to talk about finding the right partner, growing a loving relationship, love languages, and how to use them, 5 habits for couples, and free and cheap date ideas. So I wanted to start by giving a little of my dating history and how you can find the right partner. And I want you to rest assured, you will probably not find the right partner right away. For me, I went through a pretty terrible, I would say, relationship in my high school years. I had a very jealous, manipulative, controlling, and just not kind boyfriend for way too long, way longer than I like to admit or talk about. And honestly, I just don't talk about it. I maybe in other episodes will open up about that whole situation. For me, it just still fills me with a lot of anxiety to talk about it just because I know we have mutual friends still kind of. And so my heart is literally racing talking about it. I just don't talk a lot about that situation. But I knew when I was searching for my next boyfriend, it definitely didn't happen quickly. There was about 4 different people that I went on dates with and then didn't actually date officially. And then I found Nate, my now husband, and I found him freshman year of college. We were friends at first for a while. We would hang out the first time, and this is how I knew it was a good one, is the first time we hung out, we watched The Office for probably 4 hours. It was 12 in the morning to 4 a.m. Watch The Office. And that was literally the first date, I guess, ish, not really a date, that we went on. And then that was really that. I'm like, oh my gosh, this guy likes The Office. He is just very respectful, very kind, walked me back to my dorm at 4 o'clock in the morning. He was just very considerate. And so after that, he would start going on runs with me. I tried to get back into running very randomly my freshman year of college, and I didn't really want to run by myself. So he said he would tag along. He was just always very thoughtful. And I feel maybe after the first or second time of hanging out with him, I told my friend Katie, I'm like, I don't know what it is, but I really think I'm going to marry this guy. And of course, that sounds a little crazy. We were friends for a few months before that. But then he was a senior in college. I was a freshman. So I graduated in 3 years. But during that in-between period, he graduated. He moved home to study for his CPA exams. And then he started working. And so he didn't ghost me, but he didn't date me then until almost a year after he graduated. I didn't see him for about 6 months. We were still talking, still friends, but I was heartbroken because I thought that I was so in love with him. At that time, obviously it was still very fresh to be saying that, but then in January, we started hanging out again, and then we finally started dating in April. So almost a full year after he graduated from college, we then started dating, and we dated then for 11 months. And that was kind of during that COVID period of time. So it was kind of off and on when we'd see each other. A lot of it was us taking grab and go food and going for walks in Lincoln, meeting halfway, just because COVID was a big deal in 2020 to 2021. So a lot of our dates looked like that. And then in April of, gosh, I'm really bad with dates, but I think it was April, we then got engaged. And we were engaged for 4 months before we got married. We actually looked at wedding venues before we were actually engaged, and we put down a deposit at a wedding venue before we were engaged, which I'm sure, at least feel like his parents had to have thought it was absolutely crazy. My mom knew, okay, this is pretty, Bailey's, she thought she was going to marry him the second date they went on. So I think, she's probably pretty sure about this. But yeah, we got married within 4 months of being engaged. And now we have been married for 2 years and 6 months. And I genuinely, we talk about all the time, we're like, why don't more people around us get married so quickly? Because it's the best thing ever. Being able to live with and just do life with the person you love most is just so cool. And I think that is just the sweetest part of marriage is just how much time you get to spend together. And we're kind of unique too of we both work from home most of the time. I of course do some things outside of the house, job wise or client wise, grocery store sessions or leading group exercise, but most days we are home together. And I genuinely never get tired of being with him. I never get tired of seeing him. I never get tired of being with somebody all the time. And I just feel like that's kind of how it should be. Not saying everything is always like sunshine and rainbows, but I just feel like he is such a mellow, kind person that it's really hard to get tired of being around him because he doesn't cause waves. Like, he is just so refreshing to be around. And so that is just like probably the most special thing, is just being married now. And crazy that we've been married this long. I think we've both have changed for the better in a lot of different ways since we've gotten married. We've gone through 3 different moves together. We lived in Omaha for 2 years, 2 different apartments, and then we moved here back to kind of closer area to my family. Now he lives on a farm, which is so outside of his comfort zone. And I feel like I get asked a lot, like, does he actually like it out here? And no, I did not force him to move here. Sometimes I feel like, not that people would assume that, but it's very different for him. And so I'm like, I didn't force him. I didn't drag him out here to live on a farm. But it's really just allowed us to spend a lot of time together, and I think also take on different roles. Something I've definitely noticed as our relationship has progressed and we've now live in our own home is how much I appreciate the masculine and feminine role, which I think is part of finding the right partner, right? You have to kind of identify like if you're more feminine or more masculine as a person. For me, I would say I'm very much like have the masculine tendencies. Like I historically have. Like I like to take control, be productive, contribute financially to a relationship. Like I just really like that. And I like making decisions. But as we've lived here, and there's kind of an example I think of too. So we have chickens, and when we first moved here, I was doing all the chicken chores, and I get that. Like I signed up for this. I am the one who is like, yeah, we'll take the chickens, we'll take the cats, we'll butcher our own chickens. And so I put a lot of that responsibility on myself until finally I'm like, I'm tired of this. Like I need your help. And I think when you're able to communicate that in a relationship of like, I don't want to be so masculine or have those characteristics. Like I want to be more in my feminine energy. I guess I'm not super into that, but I've noticed how much that has benefited our relationship. Even like as we're doing kitchen remodeling, like I'm like, I don't want to be lifting heavy things. I don't want to hurt myself trying to move a stupid fridge. Like I don't want to do that. Like find somebody that is strong that can help you. And it doesn't mean that women can't and that we aren't strong and powerful, you know, all the things. But like, I just got to a point where I wanted him to take more control of our relationship and take more control of those more like physically demanding tasks. And I wanted to do more of the cooking and the baking and cleaning and taking care of things. Like, I don't know. It's just those different roles that you take on, you know, and as you think about having kids, like usually the women are the caretakers and they're the more compassionate and gentle ones, and the dads are a little bit more stern. Like I do really like those traditional roles. And at first I really wanted to resist it. I even remember when we were talking about like who's going to talk at the wedding, you know, usually like the groom stands up and is like, thank you so much for being here. We're both so happy. And I had told my dad, I'm like, my husband's not going to talk for me. If I want to tell people thank you for being somewhere, like I'm going to tell them myself. Like Nate doesn't need to talk for me. And my dad's like, oh boy, okay, gosh, poor Nathan. I'm like, now looking back, I definitely would want Nate to talk for me. But I think I was so much like, no, I'm independent. Like I had been single for a long time. And before that, I was in a relationship where I really had to protect myself. And so I think I just really got into that mindset of like, no, I can do everything myself. And now I'm just at a state where like, I don't want to. And that's the beautiful thing of being married is you don't have to. And if you're not married, I definitely don't want you to feel like you have to be married, I guess, to have that type of dynamic in a relationship. You might even notice that with friendships, like male-female friendships or your boyfriend. This isn't to say like all of this information only pertains to you if you're married. I think there are so many different instances, even like a daughter and a dad relationship, like that could play in. Obviously, maybe not to the extreme of being married, but to some extent, like as a daughter, sometimes you want your dad to just take care of everything for you. I know for a long time, like he took care of all my finances and And I liked that. And that's the thing, is I just never wanted that control over that. Like in my eyes, that was kind of a more masculine tendency, is to care about the finances. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is I've noticed in our relationship, it helps a lot if we just settle into our roles. And sometimes that does mean more of that like feminine, masculine energy, and kind of truly empowering yourself to fulfill those energies versus like me having to, have the final say or want all the control. Like, I just don't feel like I want to do all of that myself anymore. So I wrote down some things that I've learned from being married, and I wanted Nate to come on this episode with me because a lot of people ask like, well, how did you guys meet? Well, we met in college. I kind of gave the whole breakdown of that. It was a very like fast forward way of sharing our relationship progression, but obviously this is not seasoned advice. We've only been married 2 years and 6 months, but anyway, I wanted Nate to come on to share, and he just does not want to. He's a little intimidated by the podcast, and I'm like, but people loved the episode you were on, and we'll see. Maybe in the next year, we'll be able to get him on again. But I wrote out what I feel like I've learned, and I wanted to share that with you today just because there's a lot of little things that I think we maybe don't think about when you get married or when you're dating. So anyway, let me just get into it. So the first thing I've learned is that you have to take care of yourself if you want to adequately take care of others. And I talk about this a lot, but I notice if I'm not taking care of myself, I'm not a very kind person. A lot of the time, this looks like me making an hour kind of in my morning to exercise most days of the week or eat a really good breakfast. Like, I need that time. I need a good hour plus in the morning to get my day going. And when I'm able to do that, I am just so much kinder throughout the day. I want to serve other people or do things for my husband when I'm taking care of myself. And I just know this translates to when you have kids. Like, we think we have to put everyone before ourselves, but then eventually you are running on nothing and you have nothing left to give, but you're forced to. And it's less of like a want to, and it's more of like a forced want, like a forced have to, I guess, of taking care of the people around you. So that is number one. I need my space. I need my time in the morning to really set my day up to be then a kind wife. The second thing is that serving your husband or significant other should be a desire of your heart. So like I had said, I thought I was just so independent, didn't want anybody's help, could do everything myself. And I started to learn that serving people doesn't mean that you can't be independent, or it doesn't mean that you need their help, if that makes any sense. Like, so for me, it's not a grand gesture, but like every morning I'll make my husband a coffee and bring it to him at his desk. Like, I love doing that. I look forward to doing that. And it's a desire, I think, as women for us to want to like be those caretakers and do things for other people. But that always starts with filling your cup, and then you want to do those little things. And so I just think when you think about serving your husband, like, you should do that joyfully. And for a long time, I thought that it just was like, not dreaded, but it wasn't something that I thought was like a critical part of being in a relationship, was serving them. But for me, I guess my mind always goes back to like the 1950s housewife who like their husband demands supper and they do it for them. They demand, and it's kind of like how it's played out on TV. And I guess in my mind, I thought it either needed to look like that or you just lived two separate lives but coexisted. And that's not the reality either. It's more of like, no, like you can serve each other, but it's not because my husband is demanding that I serve him. It's just me as a wife loving him and wanting to serve him. The third thing I've learned is that you can't compare your relationship to other people. Your dynamic in your life is so much different than anyone else's. I think when we first got married, we thought we needed to do like a date night every month. So we would alternate months, go on different dates. And yes, in an ideal world, that would maybe be something we did. But I started to see like when people around me were talking about all these date things they did, or they went here and did this. And I'm like, well, darn it, we just work and eat meals together. And like, that's what we do. We don't go on dates really. And I think for a while that like kind of frustrated me, and I expected my husband to plan more dates, and I didn't take any responsibility for that really, until I realized like our life doesn't need to look like everybody else's. And that's why I'm going to give you like free and very realistic, cheap date ideas at the end of the episode. Because for me, a date night, I love making a meal in the kitchen together and eating with like a candlelit dinner just as much as I would going out to a restaurant. Like I just do. And that's just our personalities. Like we both know when we eat out, we don't feel very great. Usually the food isn't anything better than I could have made at home. And I always say it's not because I'm a great cook. It's just the food quality is pretty low at most restaurants, I would say, these days. And so I've noticed like I just like that just as much. Or going out for a walk and making that time for each other for 1 hour a day or whatever that is. Like that relationship or that piece of our relationship looks different than the people that go on dates all the time or always do all these fun activities together. Like our relationship is different, and yours is going to be different. And your friendships, even if you're viewing this more as like friendships, those are going to be different than the people next to you. And so comparing is just not the way to, I guess, benefit your relationship, because I think it just creates a lot of bitterness, especially if that's not communicated. Like if you're in a relationship and you want to go on more dates and you're really ticked off that your significant other won't plan the date, but you're not communicating that with them, like you just can't expect them to read your mind. And that's another piece is like men are very smart. I'm not going to say they're not smart, but like they can't read your mind. As women, we want them to just know and expect what we want, but they just can't. Like you have to communicate those things. And I really, really struggled with this for a long time of just like shutting down and not talking. And I remember in the beginning part of our marriage, Nate would then just like leave me alone, because when he was frustrated, he noticed like he wanted to be left alone, but I didn't want to be left alone. Like I wanted somebody to milk the information out of me. It's like, why do I do that to myself? It's like you shut down, you don't talk, somebody asks you to talk, you don't talk, they leave, and then you just get ticked off. Like, so I recognized, that's obviously not the best or the most healthy communication skill. And so it's like, we had that conversation of like, we just need to like say what's on our mind rather than shutting down and not talking, because it doesn't really help like fix the situation or talk through the situation. And so that's something too of like, they can't read your mind. If you can't read their mind, they sure as heck can't read yours. I think us women, we like to kind of bottle up those emotions sometimes, but I promise just let them freely flow sometimes. And it's not going to damage your relationship if you have those really good communication skills established, or at least just an understanding too that you would never maliciously do something to hurt each other. I think then you're able to be much more open and honest in your conversations. Okay, number 4 was that you can't expect them to make all of the plans. I personally have noticed I like to be pursued, but I also know that if I'm not pulling my weight, I can't expect things to just happen. And so this is what I had talked about with like the date night. I started to notice like I would expect Nate to plan a date every single month, when initially we're like, well, let's alternate months. Like you plan and then I'll plan. Well, then eventually I was just like, why isn't he planning anything? And it was my month to plan something, so you just can't expect all of the weight to be on them to do things like that. If you want to go on a date, like communicate that. And if they want you to plan it, like they need to communicate that to you. And I think this mindset around marriage honestly really changed when I listened to the Testimony podcast, and it's by my friend Lyndon, but she had on Mary Bishop, and she talked all about the secrets to a happy marriage. And there was just some different examples in there that really made me think about how and reflect on how I respond as a wife. So for example, one of the examples they had given was coming home from work. So like if your husband comes home from work, and so kind of say, and I've noticed this in my own life, say you're sitting on the couch watching TV, your husband comes home from work, and you just kind of ignore him, let him go change out of his work clothes and then make his own supper, and you just sit there. Is anybody really in the wrong? Not necessarily, but if the roles were reversed, if you were to come home after a long day of work and you were just exhausted, and your husband was sitting on the couch and he didn't say anything to you, didn't greet you, how would you feel as a wife? Like, you would probably feel kind of neglected. You would feel not very loved or cared for or about. And probably it would kind of piss you off. Like, I know it definitely would for me. Like, it would hurt my feelings. And so it's kind of, okay, then put yourself in his shoes. Like, when he comes home from work, have supper made for him and greet him, give him a hug, tell him, ask him about his day, like, tell him how much you appreciate how hard he's working. It's like all of those things that we maybe have thought we don't need to do. It's probably worth putting in the effort to do. And that's something I have definitely recognized about myself, is like, if he comes home late from work, I'll be in bed reading and I'll just stay in bed and read. Where it's like, I need to be better about having food for him when he gets home and greeting him at the door. And that really changed how I view myself as a wife. I think a lot of the time we want to put blame on other people, but then when you reflect back on yourself, you're like, oh yeah, that's a red flag that I do that I should change. But they also talk about the differences in this podcast about men and women. And so how like women verbally want that affirmation, and that's how we feel loved. When we're told how good we look, or how good our food was, or we're hugged throughout the day, or given kisses throughout the day, like those little things make us feel so loved. Whereas with men, it's more of the physical intimacy that then they equate to love. And I'm not going to say that's across the board, but that was just something they had mentioned. It's just the difference in how we receive love. And so like, if you're going to piece that together to help out each other, like both of you have to actively be pursuing each other to then feel like your relationship is full of love. So that was another really interesting piece of that, is like how different we are, and why maybe sometimes when they're not giving you all those little like affirmations throughout the day, it's because, well, that's not what they need to feel loved, but as women we do. So it's like recognizing what you both need. And I think this really ties into love languages. And this is something you can take like a quiz to see what your love language is. I know for me, mine is quality time, acts of service, and words of affirmation. That's how I receive love. And for the longest time, I didn't want to think acts of service was, and I think that has definitely maybe changed a little bit too with age, I guess, is just because like I kind of want people to do stuff for me now, whereas previously like I would just do it myself. And maybe that's kind of like the older sister syndrome in me of like just being that kind of caretaker for like a younger sibling. And then as you get married and you realize there's somebody else that like wants to take care of you and can take care of you, I kind of started feeding into that a little bit more. But then with Nate, and he hasn't taken his, and I could be wrong, but I would say that his would be quality time and acts of service. And that's how he receives love, which is really cool that both of us have quality time. And I think that's why we can work together at home so cohesively, and we work together really well, just because we like just time spent with each other, period. Doesn't matter what we're doing. So I think that's also where like the date night plays in. Like, we don't need a date night. Like, let's just make supper together. Give me an hour of undivided attention off of your phone. And that is truly how we then feel love for each other. But I think once you know this about each other, you can then start to identify habits around each, right, for you and for them, that can cater to both of you. So that's why I'm now going to go into the habits that have improved our relationship, knowing what our love languages are, because these have then kind of fit in very perfectly. So I've got 6 different habits, and of course you could add these in as well. It's not just us specific. I would say if quality time is a big one for you and your partner, that this would be a good thing to incorporate. So the habits that we do daily or weekly or bi-weekly, I was thinking these were daily habits, and then I started thinking about it. I'm like, well, we don't do those all every single day, but it's definitely something we're actively thinking about and doing throughout the week. So the first one is going and working out together 3 times a week in the mornings. This is something we started at the beginning of the new year, and it gives us 40 minutes round trip of driving time to talk about our day, what's going on that day, what's going on that week, or just have conversations. But it's also really cool because we're both putting our physical health first in the morning. And then we're able to have conversations together. Usually we get home. I feel like I've kind of gotten into the habit of like making us bacon. I'll do some sourdough toast with peanut butter and honey and flaky sea salt, and then like some blueberries, I guess, for today. But then he'll do Cheerios because that is his number one breakfast. He's done that forever. I can't, and I never would change that about him, even though it's not a core 4 breakfast. I've accepted it, and that's why I'm like, okay, let me make you some bacon. So we'll kind of do that together, get ready together. We'll start working, and then I'll make our coffees. And that's just kind of what our mornings look like 3 times a week. And I just have found that to be a really refreshing thing to do together, again, because we're putting our health first and then we're taking care of each other. The second one is going for walks outside. When I was asking Nate, like, what do we do to improve our relationship? He was like, I feel like a lot of it has to do with walking. And that is so true. When we lived in Omaha in the old market, I would say on average, we probably walked 3 to 4 miles a day together, like after work. And it was almost year round. Sometimes we would bring our dog Luna. Other times it was just us. But we would go for walks, and we just really recognized that was a great time for us to decompress. We could talk or we could not talk, but I felt like when I was able to talk through what I was struggling with or working on with somebody else, it was so refreshing, and vice versa, he could do the same to me. What's also really nice about that relationship piece is it's different than any relationship you would have, right? Like if you'd go to a friend, friends listen, yes, but sometimes the feedback that you get from friends is not always wanted. Whereas I've noticed, and maybe this is like specific to Nate, but he's a very, very good listener. And then if you ask for the feedback or if you ask for an opinion, like he will thoughtfully think about something to say back to you. And I think that's one of my favorite things about him is he's so intentional with his words, and he doesn't just talk to talk. If you've met him, you know, he's pretty quiet, I would say, if you don't know him super, super well. But that's just because he's always like actively listening. And he's very thoughtful in his response, which I've been in a relationship in the past where it was just like talking to talk, and it just embarrassed me and annoyed me. And I think that's why I love that about him so much, is because it's just always like I never have to think like, oh, I'm going to be embarrassed by something he says. Like never. I just never am, because I know there's so much intention behind it. But like I was saying, a lot of what we would do then was go for walks. And then a lot of what we did at our other apartment, we had like a lake behind us. We would go for walks. And that habit is just really good for building an understanding of what each other are going through and how you can help each other navigate that. The third one is sitting and eating supper together. I want to put an emphasis on sitting at the dinner table and having dimmed lights. I've talked about dim lights for lowering cortisol and then increasing your melatonin production to equate to better sleep. But with this, then we alternate who says the prayer that night or for each meal, depending on like if we're sitting to eat lunch together, he'll say the prayer and then I'll say it at supper. We just kind of alternate with that. But I think eating at a dinner table is the key point to that. I've heard a lot of people recently who are like, yeah, we sold our dinner table, or we don't sit at the dinner table. We just sit by the coffee table and eat. And even if you're living alone, right, or you're living with roommates, really that habit of sitting at a table, I think just gets you in the mindset of like having a conversation versus like, oh, well, let's just turn on the TV and eat, because then you're just mindlessly eating. So I really like that intentional sit down and eat together. The fourth one is going to bed at the same time. That's something we've always kind of done. It's kind of out of the norm if we don't. Like a couple nights ago, I fell asleep on the couch until like 4 o'clock in the morning, but that was with Nate. He said he tried to get me off the couch like 5 different times and I just wasn't having it. So usually we go to bed together at the same time and we do red light therapy, and then we'll do a magnesium supplement. Sometimes we'll read together and then we go to bed. And I just think that's a really good routine of like, okay, we're both, the night is ending, we're winding down, we're going to bed at the same time. The fifth one is finding a TV show that we can watch together and saving it only for when we're with each other. We're kind of on a Modern Family kick right now. We really are liking that one just because it's very lighthearted, and with us, and especially him, working later hours or into the evenings most days of the week now, just having a show that actually allows you to wind down. I talk a lot about like having conversations, but sometimes you just want to mutually laugh together or mutually watch something without having to feel like talking. And so having that show has been really good. And then number 6, which is probably my favorite, is coffee shop dates. We do this anytime we go somewhere outside of our area that we live in. We'll go to a coffee shop, we'll sit there, and it's just a date. And we do it usually, I would say, on like a Saturday morning. But I just truly love that. And again, it's that coffee shop, you guys. I'm telling you, I am obsessed, and it's very niche, but I just love it. I love the vibe. I love the environment. I love the drink. It's just the best. Okay, so then I'm just going to rapid fire. It's already been about 50 minutes of an episode. I was going to keep this one shorter, but surprise, it's not. So rapid round of free or cheap date ideas. And I want to also say this could be with friends. This doesn't have to be with your significant other, but the first one is a coffee shop brainstorm session. So tying back into that, one thing that we started implementing at the beginning of the new year, and we did this last year, but we went to a coffee shop and we both bought a journal, and we just like wrote out what we wanted our year to look like. And we just sat and did that together and then shared it with each other. Another thing we've done in the past is even planning out our remodel. So when we had just bought the house, we got very like obsessive over, okay, what renovations are we going to do? We didn't live in our house until May after buying it in December or January. Then we didn't actually live here till May. The previous owners were renting it. But we would just, during that kind of time in between, we're like, well, let's brainstorm what we want the kitchen to look like. So we went and bought a faucet, which now I'm trying to sell the faucet on Facebook Marketplace because it was a little premature. We bought handles for the kitchen cupboards and like all these little things that we wouldn't have needed to do. And we ended up actually returning or selling most of them. But it was just fun to brainstorm together like what we want that space to look like. And so I would say another piece of this a lot of the time is because I work by myself, with myself, like I don't have another person to bounce ideas off of. So a lot of the time I'll ask him what he thinks and how I could maybe grow this aspect of my business or change what this looks like. And so just having like those brainstorming sessions where you're collaborating and thinking about things together is really fun. Next one is finding a hike in the area or going for walks. Like I said, that's a huge one for us. It just opens up good conversation. You also don't have to talk if you don't want to. The third one was a hot air balloon festival. We've only gone once, which Nate was like, that was not cheap because he got pulled over actually on our way home and then had to do that stop class. But it really should have been an affordable experience, and it was really cool, really fun. They do them in, what area was that? I'm not sure, Nebraska somewhere. And just a good thing to do that's kind of out of the norm. Like you don't typically think to do that. I know there's also like air shows where there's like planes that will go up and do different tricks in the sky, I guess. That can also be really fun. It's just something that's very like you're outside, but you're not having to be physically super active. You can just enjoy a show, and that can be really fun. Okay, next one, the local farmers market. Next, movie night with snack packs. Since I was young, we would always go to the movie theater, and my mom would let us get like those snack packs where you can get popcorn and a pop and a piece of candy and those Smarty Suckers. And so when my brother was little, I started making them for him. And now as I'm married, which Nate doesn't really snack, so it's kind of hit or miss, but this would be a good idea if you're with, dating somebody that does. But you do like a little snack pack and choose a movie together that you both enjoy. Next one is going to the zoo. That's usually pretty affordable, even getting lunch before or after the zoo. Like it's just a really fun, again, way to get outside, get some fresh air. Next one is a workout class or workout together following a video at home. We've done this before, and you just put something on YouTube, you do a workout together on a Saturday morning, and then you make breakfast together. Like it's just really fun. Even if you're not maybe the most active couple, no hate to that, but it's just a way to add in variety, right? Where you both maybe dread working out. Well, maybe you could dread it together and just do it in the morning, get it over with, and eat a good breakfast afterwards. It's just kind of fun, and I really enjoy doing that with Nate too. Okay, last 3 was house projects. So painting is something we've been doing a lot of, I would say, in our house, and we're almost finished with all of that with the exception of our kitchen. But even just like making a fun drink, like an adrenal cocktail I did one time, or another time I had kombucha that I put into little glasses with ice and we just sipped on those and painted. Like, it maybe sounds very mundane, but I think as you get even further into your relationship, you notice like it doesn't have to be anything super crazy as long as you're just spending time together and you have music on. It can still be really fun to do that. Okay, last 2, doing supper outside. I love doing this, and I just love being outside, obviously, with all of these ideas, but being outside and even like during sunset, having on some string lights, or maybe doing a candlelit dinner with a meal you made at home. Like, you can make it free. Not free because you're paying for the food, but using what you have, or even like you each taking a dish to make and making that together. And then lastly, doing a game night. And we actually did this last weekend. We had over my brother and his girlfriend, Ava, and we made supper. So I did like steak tacos, chips and salsa, and then I made like these homemade cookie dough bark, whatever, that they had then for dessert. But then we played Skippo afterwards, and like, just fun. We rarely sit down. I honestly had to take everything out of the package because we had never played that game, and I know we got it for our wedding, so over 2 years ago. But just playing games, like, it's not anything too riveting, but like, it was fun because it's a game that you could sit down and you could talk while you were playing, and it didn't require too much brain power. And I kind of think those are the perfect ones because you don't have to really think about it and you can still have conversation. Okay, so I guess kind of in conclusion with this, I don't, again, want you to feel like you have to be married to follow any of this or even be in a relationship, but hopefully you got something out of this that you could add into your relationship, or even just some insight into what being married looks like, or different things you could do as a wife. A lot of variety. This is very new for me. I don't usually openly talk about relationship things like this, but it's definitely a part of your well-being, your emotional wellness. I would say the quality of your relationship is a huge factor in your emotional health. And so, evaluating the role you're playing in the relationship, what you actually could be doing more of, what you could do less of, that reflection is really big and something that I don't always like to do because I notice there's a lot of faults that I'm doing in our marriage, but that doesn't mean I'm not also doing good things, and ultimately just finding that person that you feel comfortable around, that cares so deeply about you, that never makes you question if they love you. And for me, that's obviously Nathan. He has been a huge piece of my healing journey, and I know I've talked about it in the past, but just to kind of mention briefly, like when we first got married, I was really struggling with my relationship with food. Very restrictive mindset when it came to food. I would work out for over an hour every single day. And I think when I learned that I could be so deeply loved by somebody, I started then to love myself more and not want to punish my body for eating something or avoid something because it was going to make me fat or whatever I was telling myself. I think when I realized like I could be loved regardless of what I looked like, and it was unconditional. And I think the love that he shows me is as closely related to the type of love that we receive from God. And when you're able to just get a glimpse of even just a fraction of the love that God has for us in a person, that is a pretty remarkable moment, and one that I'm just very, very blessed to have. If you're in a season of waiting and you're waiting for that person, I just hope that this encourages you. Don't feel down, don't feel left out, don't feel discouraged. I know that season of waiting is really hard, and sometimes we're waiting way longer than we think we should be, and that is a really hard thing to accept. At age 18, I was told I needed to have back surgery. This was then followed with 2 rounds of steroid injections that didn't work and 2 different pain medications that eventually had my kidneys not functioning properly. I lived with chronic pain for 2 years before I really identified what was going on and how I could minimize the symptoms. So I have 2 fractured vertebrae and a bulging disc, which I still live with today. But what I've learned is how to minimize the overall inflammation in my body. I do this through the use of the anti-inflammatory diet, which is also what I help clients with. What's crazy is there are 7 different areas that inflammation can show up in your body, from brain and nervous system to detoxification system to musculoskeletal, which is what I dealt with, along with digestive inflammation. There's truly so many symptoms or signs that can come along with this. I think the hardest part for people is identifying the root cause, which is why I also add in the inflammation assessment during our initial call. So we know what we're working on, we know where inflammation is showing up in your body. And then from there, after 24 weeks or throughout 24 weeks, we work towards minimizing the symptom. So I designed my one-on-one coaching program, Nourish to Flourish, so you could feel your best physically, mentally, and internally by focusing on all 3 components that make up a truly balanced lifestyle: your mind, your body, and your spirit. So we examine how different foods affect your body, intolerances you might have, and through the use of the anti-inflammatory diet, we work towards reducing the signs of inflammation and stress in your body. So if you're noticing bloating, constipation, abdominal cramps, painful periods, chronic pain, swelling, acne, water retention, trouble sleeping, low energy, joint pain, fatigue, the list goes on and on, we truly can work together to minimize those symptoms and truly transform your health. So if you're interested, DM me, email me, message me the word Nourish, and I will send more information your way. Feel good in your skin, never count calories again, and heal your body and your relationship with food. Let's nourish to flourish. And I also just want to say, if you've been in a really bad relationship and you're struggling finding the right person because of maybe the harm that that relationship has done to you, I am here to talk. I am obviously not trained mental health therapist. If you need guidance outside of just somebody to kind of confide in, I would recommend talking to somebody, even a pastor. We did that during marriage counseling. That was really, really helpful for me to talk through my situation with my husband and the pastor. But find somebody, if it's not me, and if you feel like you could confide in them, that they're trustworthy, open up about your experience, because I think when we're able to work through that and heal that part of our past, or at least work towards healing that part of our past, we start to recognize the type of love that we deserve to receive, and it's usually a lot different than what we've previously experienced. So with that, I'm going to close this episode in prayer. I do post prayer request little question box on Mondays. I'm trying to be better about consistently doing it, but I'm going to start saying the first letter of their name. If this is too, like if you put in a prayer request and you're like, no, I don't want even the first letter of my name, please let me know. But I just feel like it's really hard to pray for somebody when you can't say their name. So I'm just going to use M, for example. 3 people that wrote in had the first letter of their name with an M. And I'm just going to say that and then say their prayer request while I'm praying, just because I want there to be not identification at all of them, but it's just a lot easier to pray for somebody when you can say a little bit of their name. So let's go ahead and close today's episode in prayer. So dear Lord, just thank you for this day. Thank you for the love around us and the people around us. I just ask that whoever is listening to this episode feels so loved today, but not just today, every day outside of this. I know today can be really heavy or hard for people that are experiencing loss or frustration around relationships or hurt, but I just ask that you bring healing to those people and that they can find something in today that just makes them have maybe faith and hope, that love in a true, genuine love that resembles the love you have for them, that they're able to just experience that today and moving forward. Lord, I ask that you be for Em and help her feel a little bit less lost as she's approaching a gap year. When we take that time to just sit with ourselves and decide what we want and what we want to do in the future, it can feel so overwhelming. So I just ask that you bring peace among her throughout that time. I also just pray for Em that our generation is the generation that helps to heal our parents and the things that they've gone through as they were growing up, that we then find healing as we care for and prepare for our own children. Along with this, I just pray for Em, and that she is able to find a partner that meets her needs on all levels, that she feels pursued and loved and cared for in those relationships, and that just it comes. And I know that season of waiting can be so hard for so many people. And even if it's not hard, even if it just feels lonely, or it just feels like the sense of there's something more, but it's just not happening, I just ask that you bring peace among those people too, and that they just don't give up hope that there is somebody out there for them, and that they are able to just really confide in a friend or in you during this season. Lastly, I pray for B, and that she can have more privileges at the hospital, and that she's able to move to a new center within the next 2 weeks. I pray for healing over her, and that mindset just continues to stay strong. She continues to keep really fighting, for her life and for the challenges that are ahead of her or that she's currently facing, and that you just bring her peace as well. In Jesus' name we pray, amen. All right, so thank you so much for listening to today's episode. If you'd like to follow along with my life outside of the podcast, you can find me at Nourish with Bailey on Instagram and YouTube. I've deleted TikTok. I'm trying to get off that stupid app, so I'm not going to be very active on there. Otherwise, you can always message me, email me, and if you're interested in being a guest on the podcast, or if you know somebody that you want to be a guest on the podcast, please don't hesitate to let me know. That always is super helpful. I've done a lot of solo episodes recently, and I just love to get on some more people to talk to and have conversations with. So with that, I will talk to you again next Wednesday. Bye.